My name is Elara Whitmore, and on Christmas Eve 2022, my parents opened the wrought iron doors of our Beacon Hill brownstone and threw my single suitcase onto the icy steps. My younger sister, Madeline, stood behind them, arms folded, smiling like she had waited her whole life for my collapse. "Let's see how you survive now, Elara." I dragged my suitcase through freezing Boston wind. No money, no car, no plan after the morning layoff. By the time I reached the little garden inside our gated block, my hands were numb, my breath tight. I collapsed on a snow-dusted bench, shaking so violently I could barely swallow. Then she appeared. An elderly woman, barefoot, shivering, her silver hair whipping in the wind, stood only a few feet from me. She looked like winter itself had claimed her. Without thinking, I stripped off my only warm jacket, a tan wool trench, and wrapped it around her shoulders. Her fingers closed around mine, ice cold and trembling. "Kindness like yours," she whispered, "is rarer than sapphire." She turned, stepped into the fog, and vanished. Exactly 1 hour later, the quiet street filled with headlights. 17 black SUVs rolled in, aligning with military precision. Drivers stepped out simultaneously. The center door opened and the same woman emerged. Same eyes. Same face, but transformed. She wore a camel coat, diamonds on her wrist, hair in an elegant chignon. She walked straight to me, touched my cheek, and said, "I've watched you long enough to know who you are. If you've ever been pushed aside by the people meant to protect you, drop 'I've been there' or your city in the comments. You're not alone," and what came next changed everything. Earlier that afternoon, at 2:14 p.m., I'd received the email. "Your position has been eliminated." 5 years at a Cambridge biotech startup gone in 30 seconds. I packed my desk plant into my aging Toyota and drove toward Beacon Hill, hoping my parents might let me stay a week or two. Mom sounded busy when I called. Dad didn't answer. Still, I went. The brownstone looked like a holiday magazine spread garland on the railings, chandeliers glowing, a 10-foot Douglas fir behind the window as servers set a long dining table. My father, Edwin, was opening a rare burgundy. My mother, Victoria, adjusted a diamond bracelet I'd never seen. And Madeline, now 29, spun in a glittering emerald gown, showing off an engagement ring that could blind someone. Her fiancé? Lucas Moretti, my ex of 3 years. I forced a breath. "Rough day at work." Madeline gasped dramatically. "Another firing? Mom, remember when she blamed creative differences at that marketing job?" Mom didn't deny it. Dad didn't look up. I lit a fuse without knowing it. Dad finally turned to me, voice flat. "Elara, we updated the family trust. Everything, properties, investments, accounts, is now in Madeline's name. It's irrevocable." My legs wobbled. "You're disinheriting me?" Mom sighed. "We can't keep supporting instability. You need to live within your choices." Madeline lifted her phone. "Smile for the vlog. Holiday drama gets views." Dad added the final cut. "You have 20 minutes to pack. Security will allow pickup of the rest tomorrow by appointment." I walked upstairs in a fog. My childhood bedroom swim team photos, old trophies, felt like it belonged to someone else. I packed jeans, sweaters, my laptop, toiletries into the one bag I still owned. Everything else, books, keepsakes, my framed Boston University diploma, had to wait. When I came downstairs, Madeline was live streaming my humiliation. "And here comes the prodigal sister," she narrated, "with one sad suitcase. It's oaken-dated office empty." Security waited by the door. My parents didn't even say goodbye. 20 minutes later, I was outside, coatless, jobless, disinherited. And that's when the barefoot woman returned, not barefoot anymore, not shivering, not a stranger, but someone who would completely rewrite my fate. "Any bets on how long before she's sleeping in that old Toyota?" Madeline's voice slid through the cold like a knife. My father, Edwin Whitmore, opened the front door himself. Fog swallowed the entire Beacon Hill block, so thick I couldn't see the end of the walkway. The temperature had already dipped below freezing, air sharp enough to burn. I stepped outside, dragging my single suitcase. Behind me, Madeline called sweetly, "Merry Christmas, Elara. Don't freeze." The door closed with a soft, final click. The alarm armed. And just like that, I was no longer family, just someone being pushed out of a house she grew up in. In 30 minutes, I had gone from daughter to outsider. I stood on the stone steps wearing the last warm thing I owned, a wool coat, and tried to breathe. My father's cold words ran through my head. The trust transferred entirely to Madeline, my mother refusing to meet my eyes. 34 years of loyalty erased with signatures. I started walking because standing still made the cold feel more lethal. My suitcase rattled loudly on the quiet brick street. Every lit window I passed glowed with holiday warmth, families laughing, fireplaces crackling, Christmas trees shining behind iron railings. Each one reminded me I no longer belonged anywhere. A part of me kept hoping my mother would open the door and call me back. She didn't. No apologies, no second chances. After an unclear stretch of time, maybe 20 minutes, maybe longer, I reached the small garden beside the old Episcopal church. A single street lamp cast a weak circle of light around an iron bench. I sat, dropped my suitcase handle, and finally cried. I cried for the girl who once waited under the Whitmore Christmas tree. I cried for every moment. I tried harder, achieved more, hoping to earn love. I cried because the truth finally settled. I wasn't disposable because I failed. I was disposable because I wasn't Madeline. When the tears froze on my skin, I pulled my knees to my chest, trying to plan how to survive the night. That's when I heard the soft scrape of bare feet. I looked up. The elderly barefoot woman I'd seen earlier was walking toward me, silver hair tangled, skin nearly blue, shoulders trembling under the cold. She stopped a few feet away, swaying slightly. "Young lady," she rasped, "do you know if any shelters have room tonight?" I walked from Somerville. They said everything's full. Dover. Welling appended. Appendivers. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "I don't have anywhere either." She studied me with surprising sharpness, then eased herself onto the bench beside me. I noticed her feet white at the edges, a color that meant danger. Something in me cracked. Without thinking, I stood, removed my only warm coat, and wrapped it around her shoulders. She flinched at the sudden warmth, then pulled it tightly around her thin frame. "What's your name?" she asked softly. "Elara." She repeated it like it mattered. "Thank you, Elara." She took my frozen hands, held them for a long moment, then rose and walked into the fog, steadier than before. When she disappeared, the night still hurt, but something inside me felt lighter, like giving the last thing I had returned a piece of myself I'd forgotten. Later, in a cheap motel room that smelled of old cigarettes, I sat scrolling through job listings, applying to anything remotely stable. My eyes were burning when my phone buzzed with an unknown number. "Miss Whitmore," a crisp voice said. "This is Grace O'Neill, assistant to Mrs. Eleanor Calloway. She requests to meet you immediately." I blinked. "Who?" "She will explain everything. A vehicle is waiting outside." I peered through the peephole. A black SUV idled at the curb, its headlights glowing through the fog like the beginning of something I hadn't dared to hope for. 19 identical black BMW 760 seconds filled the motel parking lot like a presidential motorcade. Their headlights cut through the fog in cold white beams. The rear door of the lead car opened by itself. Wearing the same jeans and hoodie from the past 2 days, I grabbed my keys and stepped outside. She was waiting in the middle car, the barefoot woman from the church bench, transformed beyond recognition. Her silver hair was swept into a flawless low chignon, her camel coat perfectly tailored, red-soled heels catching the thin winter light. She looked both elderly and eternal. "Get in, Elara," she said softly, like we were old friends. The door sealed behind me. The convoy pulled away, and 20 minutes later we entered a secluded 1,920 seconds Tudor estate in Lexington, hidden behind towering pines and a stone wall so high it blocked the sky. I had driven through the area for years, and never knew this street existed. Inside, the home smelled of cedar and roses. A fire roared in a stone hearth large enough to stand inside. Floor-to-ceiling windows faced a frozen pond and acres of untouched land. Everything felt impossibly quiet. She gestured toward a cream sofa. A butler poured tea, neither of us touched. "My full name is Eleanor Calloway," she began. I swallowed. "My husband built Calloway Development. When he passed, I took the company private and poured its profits into the Callaway Foundation. We oversee more than 400 million square feet of commercial property. The foundation distributes around $120 million a year. The numbers didn't sound real. Eleanor leaned forward. Every Christmas Eve, for 25 years, I leave this estate disguised as someone who has nothing. No security. No wallet. No phone. I walk until I find someone who chooses kindness when they think no one is watching. Her voice softened. Most years, I find no one. This year, I found you. A peephole. She explained that after I left her on the bench, her security team watched from a distance for 48 hours. They saw me check into the motel with cash, apply for dozens of jobs, cry alone, and never once mention what happened to anyone not online, not in a call, not even in a text. "You're the first person in 15 years, she said quietly, who gave away the last warm thing they had without wanting anything back. She stood and looked out the window. I have no children, no heirs. When I'm gone, strangers will control everything. I don't want that. I want someone who understands what it feels like to be cast out on Christmas Eve, to decide how we help the next person who gets cast out." She turned back to me. "I'm offering you a room here, a salary, and a 5-year apprenticeship. If you're the woman I believe you are, the foundation becomes yours to run." My throat tightened. "Why me?" Eleanor's eyes sharpened. "Because at 29, my father threw me out too. And I promised myself that if I ever had power, I'd rewrite someone else's ending." She extended her hand. "Elara Whitmore, will you come home with me?" I moved into the East Wing the following Monday. My new room was larger than my parents' entire first floor, French doors opening onto a rose garden even in winter bloom. Grace O'Neill, tall, silver-haired, no nonsense, handed me a leather binder thick as a brick. "Welcome to boot camp," she said. And just like that, the life I'd lost on Christmas Eve was replaced by one I never imagined existed. Don't miss what happens next. Hit subscribe so you're here for the next chapter, because Elara's story is only getting deeper, darker, and more unbelievable from this moment on. There were mornings I cried in the shower, convinced someone would discover I didn't belong in Eleanor Callaway's world. But every time I thought about quitting, I remembered that freezing bench in Boston the night I had nothing, and I kept going. June arrived hot and sudden. One Thursday morning, Eleanor texted, "Library, now." I walked in expecting another marathon strategy session. Instead, she stood alone in the colored sunlight from the stained glass windows, holding a single folder. She didn't sit. She slid the folder across the mahogany table. Inside was an employment agreement printed on heavy cream stock. Title: President and CEO, Callaway Family Foundation. Reporting line: directly to the board, meaning her. Base salary: $195,000. Equity: 3% of an endowment just under $4 billion. Authority: full oversight of programs by year 3. I looked up, stunned. Eleanor finally sat. "I didn't bring you here because you gave away a coat," she said. "Anyone can be generous for 5 minutes." Her voice softened. "I watched you for 5 months. I watched you fight for a domestic violence shelter everyone wanted to cut. I watched you sit in Oakland until midnight listening to a 17-year-old who couldn't go home. I watched you rewrite a 70-page policy because one sentence would have denied transgender kids beds." Her throat tightened. "You have the mind I need and the heart I lost years ago. The foundation is yours to run. I'll stay on the board to keep the old men from sinking the ship, but the river belongs to you now." I tried to speak, couldn't. She waved me off. "Sign it before I make you finish the tax module first." I laughed through tears and signed. That night, we opened a 1,982 Chateau Margaux on the terrace. Sunlight slipped behind the redwoods. She lifted her glass. "To the girl who chose kindness when she had nothing." I lifted mine. "To the woman who refused to let that kindness go unseen." Act. For the first time since Christmas Eve, I felt steady, like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. By October, San Francisco smelled like wet leaves and new money. I sat in my corner office on the 22nd floor of 300 California Street, reviewing projections for our new housing initiative, when Grace knocked once and entered. "Your sister and Derek Whitfield are downstairs," she said. "No appointment." My stomach clenched. I told security to send them up. They walked in looking like two people who'd practiced remorse in the elevator. Madeline in a modest navy dress, hair pulled back, minimal jewelry. Derek in a suit, instead of his usual founder hoodie. Both wore tight, performative smiles. Madeline spoke first. Elara, we've been awful. I'm sorry, for Christmas Eve, for everything I posted. Derek nodded quickly. We're getting married next spring, trying to fix things. I didn't move. I waited. Madeline drew a breath. Dad's in trouble. Bad investments. He and Mom might lose the house, and Derek's startup AI for elderly care needs $2 million to close the round. We wouldn't ask if it wasn't life or death. I raised an eyebrow. Which part is life or death, Dad's mortgage or your valuation? Derek chuckled weakly. Come on, $2 million is nothing for the foundation. I leaned back. Tell me what happened to the $38 million you took last December. Madeline blinked. We diversified. Crypto, NFTs, angel deals. All gone. Grace had already placed a folder on my desk. Bank statements, screenshots, a Forbes headline. Whitmore heiress blows inheritance on meme coins. 87% gone in 11 months. You bought Lambos, I said calmly, put a deposit on a Miami condo, paid influencers to pump coins. That's not a downturn, that's arson. Madeline's mask slipped. You're really going to sit there and let Mom and Dad go homeless? I pressed the intercom. Security to 22, please. It's 7 interstum. Derek tried charm. Come on, Elara, $2 million is petty cash here. You'll never even miss it. The door opened. 2 guards stepped in. I rose. This foundation exists for people who never had a safety net, I said. Not for people who burned theirs down and now want mine. You're not getting a dime. Not today. Not ever. Madeline flushed red. You ungrateful bitch. She was already hitting record as the guards took her by the elbows. By the time they reached the lobby, 3 paparazzi vans and a gossip blogger were waiting. Someone had tipped them off. Madeline switched to full performance, trembling lip, sobbing about her cold-hearted sister abandoning her own blood. The video hit TikTok within 20 minutes. Caption: My billionaire sister won't help our parents keep their house. Hashtags: Family first number, toxic sibling. It exploded 10 million views in 6 hours. Then the internet remembered who Madeline really was. Old classmates posted yearbook photos of her dumping yogurt on my backpack. Someone resurfaced the Instagram live from Christmas Eve, where she laughed while I hauled my suitcase out. A former nanny described how Madeline used to lock me outside in the rain for fun. Public sentiment flipped. Number Hayes family exposed rose above the original hashtags. Then Derek's pitch deck leaked. Someone at the foundation had accidentally forwarded it to a journalist. The AI for elderly care startup was 90% vaporware and 10% his cousin's garage project. Investors ghosted. Madeline's wedding planner canceled. She'd never paid the deposit. Their engagement post was ratioed into oblivion. I never said a word publicly. By midnight, the video was age-restricted for bullying. The blogger issued an apology. Madeline's follower count dropped by half. When I returned to the Lexington estate, Grace handed me a scotch. Poetic justice tastes better when you don't have to lift a finger, she said. I raised my glass. No, it tastes like closure. November arrived with a fog that clung to the bay like a bruise. The news broke on a Tuesday. Pacific Crest Capital collapses $4. 2B Ponzi scheme exposed. My father had moved every remaining dollar mortgage refinance, home equity line, even my mother's jewelry into the fund 6 months earlier. The guaranteed 18% annual return was supposed to fix everything. Instead, the FBI raided the Newport Beach offices. The founder had already fled toward Cabo. 30 days later, a foreclosure notice was stapled to the front door of the Hillsborough mansion. No bidders came to the auction. The bank took the house. My parents and Madeline moved into a 2-bedroom apartment above a nail salon in East San Jose. Rent, $2,900. All they could afford after bankruptcy. Madeline's credit cards were maxed at $247,000, mostly handbags and post-scandal retail therapy. Collection agencies called constantly. One rainy Thursday, they arrived at the foundation without an appointment. Security called. I told them to let them in. My father looked 20 years older, shoulders slumped, hair white. My mother's hair was a harsh drugstore brown. Madeline wore no makeup, eyes swollen, clutching a knockoff tote. I met them in a glass conference room. Grace stood outside. My father spoke first. Elara, we hurt you. We know that. But we have nowhere else. Our lease ends in 6 weeks. We'll be on the street. My mother shredded a tissue. Madeline finally whispered, please. Just enough to start fresh. We'll never ask again. I opened a slim folder and laid out 3 business cards. 1. Marcus Chen, CFP post-bankruptcy recovery. 2. Foundation-funded financial literacy course. 3. NAMI hotline and a sliding scale therapist. This is what we offer strangers, I said. It's the same help we offer anyone who comes here scared. If you cares to the sitter. My father's hand shook halfway to the cards. That's it? After 34 years? I stood. You had choices, I said. You rewrote the trust. You chased fantasies. And now you're facing the consequences you created. You chose to stay silent when Madeline humiliated me for sport, I said. Those were your decisions, not mine. My mother finally looked up, tears slipping down her cheeks. We were wrong, we're so sorry. I met her eyes for the first time in almost 2 years. I believe you're sorry now. But sorry doesn't rebuild a life. Work does, courage does, taking responsibility does. Madeline broke, sobbing loud and unrestrained. You're enjoying this, you want us to suffer. I walked to the door and held it open. No, I just refuse to pay for your suffering anymore. Security escorted them out. My father never looked back. My mother whispered one last "I'm sorry" before the elevator closed. Madeline kept crying until they reached the lobby. Grace handed me a tissue. They'll be okay, she said softly. People who hit bottom either stay there or start climbing. You just gave them the only ladder we're allowed to give. I nodded, watching rain streak the windows. For the first time, the ache in my chest was gone, replaced not by joy, but by space. Room to breathe. The sky over East Palo Alto was the color of steel on opening day. Second home rose like a promise, kept 4 stories of glass and redwood built around a courtyard where kids chased each other between boxes of rosemary and kale. 3,000 people filled the plaza. Families who would live here, donors, city leaders, every major network, even the governor ready to cut the ribbon. Backstage, in a simple black suit, my heart pounded louder than the marching band warming up. Grace squeezed my hand. Eleanor, elegant in winter white, gave me a small nod from the front row. This was the project I had bled for. 200 permanent supportive apartments, an on-site clinic, job training center, preschool, rooftop farm, and a policy that no one would ever be turned away for lack of paperwork. The mayor finished his speech. The crowd roared as my name was called. I stepped to the podium. The microphone felt heavier than any trust document I'd ever signed. I scanned the crowd. Near the back, half hidden behind a column, stood my father, mother, and Madeline. Dad wore a loose navy pea coat. Mom clutched a paper cup. Madeline stood small, hair chopped short, stripped of designer armor. I let silence settle. 1 year ago tonight, I began, voice steady. I was thrown out of the only home I'd ever known. I learned what it feels like when the people who are supposed to catch you drop you instead. A ripple moved through the crowd. But on a freezing bench, I learned something else. Real family isn't DNA. Real family is the person who sees you when you're invisible. The hand that reaches out even when you have nothing to give in return. I gestured toward the building. This is second home. 200 families will never again sleep in their cars because a landlord raised the rent. Kids will never again do homework in the dark because the lights were shut off. And everyone who comes through these doors will be told the words I needed most that night. You are not disposable. You are not alone. You are home. Applause erupted, slow at first, then thunderous. Cameras flashed. People rose to their feet. I continued, softer. Tonight we open these doors for anyone who has ever been told they don't belong, especially by the people who were supposed to love them. I looked directly at my family. Dad's shoulders shook. Mom covered her mouth. Madeline stared at the ground. I gave them one heartbeat of eye contact, no smile, no scowl, and stepped away. The governor cut the ribbon. The band played. Children rushed forward with flowers. I headed toward the entrance. My father tried to step forward. Elara? I kept walking. Not fast, not slow, just forward. The massive redwood doors opened automatically. Warm light spilled onto the concrete. I crossed the threshold. Not because I hated them, not because I needed to win, but because forgiveness doesn't mean reopening the door that hurt you, it means walking through a new one. Inside, a little boy in a Spider-Man jacket tugged my sleeve. "Are you the lady who built this place?" I knelt. "I'm one of them." He handed me a dandelion. "For you, because you gave us a home." For the first time in a long time, I smiled like I meant it. Outside, the celebration roared on. Inside second home, the future began. Tell me in the comments what part of my journey spoke to you. Was it the moment I lost everything, or the moment I chose not to look back? Your words matter. Your voice matters. And maybe, like me, you're learning that the door closing behind you isn't the end, it's the beginning.